Hello.
How are you?
Hey, good. Ooh, you're coming through very quiet. Let me crank your volume up. How's your day been?
Yeah, good, good. Lately, I've been staying at home for a couple of weeks because I had a surgery and
Oh,
I had the
shit. Did it go
chance to
well?
go. Yeah, everything good, all good. Just need time to recover. And
Fantastic.
I took this occasion to actually analyze a little bit my game play in StarCraft, a little bit in general terms.
Hmm.
So if it's okay for you, since this is actually our third session,
Yeah.
um, I would like to go through some general problems before going to like more specific matchup
Yeah,
stuff.
fantastic. That's ideal. Do you have
And
specific replays for them, or is it just probably gonna just be a theory discussion talking through those problems, right?
in the beginning, probably yes, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that would be
I know
great.
maybe.
What would be good though is just for the people watching at home is if we could just load up one of your replays and we can just play that in the background. We won't actually be looking at it. It's just so we have some gameplay on
Sure.
screen. And if it is a replay we're going to look at later, it's kind of good because then I can also be kind of processing it in the back of my mind as well. So maybe there's a problem matchup or a problem build or a problem replay we'll look at later in the session and we can just put it up on screen now. What do you think?
Right. Let's go for it. I'll search for a replay on ZVT Mac.
Fantastic.
So I need to watch with others, right? First of all, I need to invite you.
Yeah, just get into chat channel Pig or Piggy. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah.
You were already in the original Pig channel, which almost
Okay.
nobody's in
Then
anymore.
I'll make you lobby host as usual.
Awesome. Thank you very much, mate. And I just fixed my green screen, but I guess that only fixed it on that source, not this one. Huh. Who knew?
Is my audio okay now?
I think you're still a bit more quiet than me. Can you bring it a little closer to your mouth or anything like that?
Yeah, like this.
Yeah, that sounds quite a bit clearer.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Okay, the guys in chat can let me know, but I think that should be pretty similar to my level of volume. Hopefully people can have it kind of relatively balanced, if not, perfect. It never is exactly perfect, but as long as it's close enough, it should be good. Okay, cool. So we'll just lock this on your camera for this replay and ignore it. So always good to have some eye candy. But yeah,
Of course, of
let's talk
course.
through those questions and those scenarios because I think that's really super useful for us to look at. So
So by the way, I already wrote everything, a little bit the bullet points on the Google Docs. So if you wanna have it on your eyes as well, up to you. Anyway, so in general, if you want to start this, I noticed a couple of things, general problems in the gameplay. And starting, I often have a larva idling.
yep,
So especially when it's very easy following your advices on just put the camera on the corner, watching the larva during replays. And I often have a larva idling for no reason, because if I now check what I was doing, well, there was not so much going on, right?
yeah.
So it's not that I had like 3 drops and one frontal push where, I was busy doing other stuff. So that's a bit of a problem.
I guess something I want to ask with that is that happening in the first like 4, 5, 6 minutes of the game a lot, or is it more later in the game?
More later in the game. So I think it's probably something related to the macro cycle.
Okay.
Um,
So it is okay to be more relaxed later on, right? So if there's fighting going on in 3 places at once and you're floating 15 lava for 30 seconds, I don't care if it's 10 minutes, 12, 14 minutes into the game, 4 base versus 4 base, right? But like you said, if nothing's happening, then, and it's sitting there for a long time, then that is a problem. But it's also something where if it's just 4 or 5 lava at the 2 minute mark, that's very bad, right?
yeah.
But if it's 4 or 5 lava, like if you just spend your lava once every 30 seconds, right? In the mid game, in the late game, that's totally fine, right? If you do the macro cycle. So it's natural for your hatcheries to pop out a larva, pop out another larva, pop out another larva. So by the time your injects are actually popping, you should already have 2, maybe 3 larvae on each hatchery. So if you are sitting on 2 larvae, not getting spent, then 4 larvae, 3 larvae, then 6 larvae, and then it's 9 larvae, and then your injects pop and you spend your money right then, 3 base versus 3 base, it's probably not the end of the world. So I just wanted to kind of put that into context. Do you think it's still, you are still kind of missing macro cycles? Because you'd mentioned that you are often neglecting the macro cycle. So is it kind of like sometimes it's just sitting there for ages and ages where it's not getting spent?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it happens that I forget the macrocycle, right? Because I know the theory behind this. I remember you have a really nice video talking about this, which is very nice. And especially like already according to all this, and maybe also all of these problems can be also connected, right? It's very hard to say this is the cause of the other, and oftentimes our one connects to the other, right? Larva idling, poor microcycle, right? So
yes,
it's difficult to say you are larva idling because of this and also the microcycle. They are connected.
Okay.
And so you see what I mean, right?
It's all one of the same, right? If you get thrown off your game in one way, it affects many other ways. So one thing there is it could be losing direction in the game. So this often happens if a player is very nervous, unconfident, or simply is unsure of what's happening in the game or what they should be doing in the game. This might be the case for you. It might only partially be the case. I'd say for everyone, even pros, it's partially the case, because you see it in games where they're confused, where the macro starts to slip, because you suddenly don't have that clear direction of, whereas, like the perfect Zerg comfort zone is like, there's a problem build in the meta, right? This is like the experience of Zerg. It's an immortal push, 3 immortals, sentries. It's hitting us at 7 minutes 30 at the exact same time every game. It looks the exact same every game. You learn the scouting tells, your overlord, your Zergling recognizes the build. Minutes ahead of time, you go, okay, I need to get 8 drones on minerals on my 3rd, 4 gases, 2 bases saturated plus the 8 drones on the 3rd. And then I need to just make roaches, ravagers, Zerglings, and defend. And like you've got this real clear game plan that you can just like drone right up to that drone point. Okay, just make roaches, just make overlords, roaches, overlords, make ravagers, spread creep. All right, here comes the fight, let's go. And it's like this very well-defined, planned out thing where you might fuck up the macro the first time doing it, but once you've experienced it a few more times, you get really good at it. And suddenly it's like clockwork, right? Very few mistakes. There's a nice rhythm to it. Everything ticks into place. So that's something where it could be like the lack of that clear understanding of what we're supposed to do in a certain situation that's hurting us. What do you think?
So it happened a couple of times, yeah, because I basically didn't know what to do. So I was like, so do I spend drones, do I do lings, do I do roaches, this kind of like, and then you end up being like 1 minute with larva idling, which is obviously like the worst thing you can do, right? So
Yep.
yeah, I'm lacking game plan in certain scenarios, which is definitely also giving me a little bit of feeling a little bit overwhelmed or not to do and like freezing basically. And instead of doing something, it doesn't matter what, you freeze, which is even worse, right?
That's the big one, yeah.
And also what I also noticed
Our drones are under attack.
The lack of multitasking. And this is like a big thing, because I was watching a little bit. I was checking also before 3-4 minutes. Sometimes I do have larva idling somewhere.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have this, right? In the first minutes, like every drone counts and it snowballs. So if you idle 2 larvas in the first 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And there I tried to come up with a cause of these problems. And one of this is that before I was not used to actually what day 9 was mentioning, like the mental checklist, right?
Yeah.
And so this is something that I never really cared before this point. right? Because I was focused on more other fundamental stuff. But now I realize it's something that if I want to do the next step, because now I reached diamond 3, and so in order to stabilize in diamond, these things has to be implemented. And
Right. So
multitasking,
We have met the enemy.
So you
in
feel like
I
you're
mean-
kind of losing track of the next thing in the list, right? Like because you're just not thinking
Exactly.
about the mental checklist. So
Exactly.
you're kind of going, cool, I've done this. What's next? Cool, I've done this. What's next, right? So you're not able to
Exactly.
smoothly jump from one thing to the next, right?
Exactly. Especially, for
Yeah.
example, if I know that I have, like, it's a stupid example, but it shows you where the problem is as far as I'm concerned. For example, okay, now I have to put down a creep tumor, and now I'm doing only that, right? So my
Yeah.
mouse and my head is focused on putting down a tumor, and while I'm doing this, okay, select the queen, put down the tumor, and while I'm doing this, I neglect going for 4, which is my hatchery like hotkey, SD, right? So it's this lacking of, also mechanics, because I'm not able, I'm not
Our
fast
forces
enough
are under
in doing
attack.
this.
A new queen has
Yeah.
been
I
and
don't know
yeah.
if you get my point.
No, I absolutely do. So there's an overlap between a lot of these concepts, which is also what you're getting at. And this is amazing. The fact that you're engaging with all of this mentally, this is such a huge thing that makes me so deeply happy, because this is kind of what you've got to be looking for is not just, I'm not spending my lava. I got to fucking spend my lava better. It's why?
Because-
You've tried that already and it didn't magically fix itself, right?
Exactly.
There's other things going on here. You can address the symptom or you can address the system underneath it, right? And that's what
Exactly.
we need to try to do, is we need to try and address the system. So in terms of the mental checklist, one of the most amazing concepts. I haven't actually watched that much Day 9 because he's done 4,000 hours of StarCraft content. But there's a few things like the mental checklist. Like I remember that some of his best dailies people had actually transcribed, and I actually read them just to get to absorb the content quicker. A long time ago. I think this was when I was first doing the Pig Daily, or maybe even before then. And the mental checklist is a great idea, because there is this thing, the more experienced you become as a player, where basically you are shuffling
We have met the enemy.
your priorities. You have not just what you're doing right now, but the next few things as well.
Tumor is under attack.
And that's something we want to have, where you go, okay, cool. So, right, I want to build roaches, I want to build hydras, and I got to remember to get my hydra upgrade and my +1 range upgrade. Oh, fuck, there's a liberator in my base. You hold that checklist. Let's grab this new item. Fucking run the drones, reposition the spore. Put those two at the very top of the checklist. Once they're done, okay, start doing the other actions. And we've also put another action 3 steps down, and that's put the drones back on mining. Right? So it's like,
Right.
make the hydroden, make the upgrades, make the thing, and now put the drones back on mining. Or we could have even queued those workers to go back, and so on. Oh, massive thank you to T-Den for the love there. I really appreciate the support, mate. Thank you very much for the tip. Much love, dude. Really appreciate it. So, part of what helps you is, okay, having this idea of, hey, you've got to have this mental checklist. You've got to have it. But part of that is also just having the set players themselves, right? It's all kind of one and the same thing, where you need to identify moments of indecision. And these are some of the best things for you to hone in on. So I always tell people, find a composition you suck against. If people often say, oh, what can I improve at, right? And I say, okay, look for a composition you suck against. Look for a situation you're uncomfortable in. Maybe you suck against Phoenixes. Maybe you suck against Terran. Maybe in this specific scenario where they multi-drop you, you feel really uncomfortable and out of your element. That's the onus. That's the impetus for you to go, okay, let's go watch that replay and really pour over it and really break down what should my system be for defending this? What are the exact tiny steps? And you want to write that all down, right? And that's something we want to start to do. So now that you're thinking about it, okay, well, if I'm freezing up, that means you're really uncomfortable, right? That's a perfect moment for you to say, let's develop a systematized response for this, rather than say, I just got to pull some shit to defend the thing. Break down the tiny steps and try to write it out and visualize it. So let's write down kind of, I guess, what we want as our
This is
formula.
by the way, sorry if I interrupt you.
Yeah,
This
no worries.
engagement here is one of the common mistakes I do, is like engaging without scouting before. Another huge thing.
Yeah.
and getting shrouded by tanks.
Every
Sorry.
Zerg at ZBT does this, man. I coach every Zerg, and I'm like, okay, you've macroed a giant army. It's time to focus
But
on
you
this
see-
on this
but you
army,
see, like, going
and the
back on
army
what
kind
you're
of runs
saying.
around in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. But going back on what you're saying, like
Yeah.
having like a proper mental checklist in this case would say, like,
We have
imagine
met the
just
enemy in combat.
theoretically, maybe we have an overseer on control group 2, which is currently not in use, right? So, having like a good training on a mental checklist would tell me, okay, I have an overseer on control 2, tap control 2, produce like a changeling, run it ahead and see before just they move, right?
Yeah.
So those are the things that I notice in my gameplay, right? It's
Yeah.
like having this constant cycling of mental things that you should always keep in mind, you know.
It's
But yeah,
definitely
sorry.
something we've got to work on there. So systematically, on ladder, how are you going to work on it? So I'm writing this little list of points here in your document. So how do we fix this? How do we systematize you developing systems for this? So it's, okay, find a point of weakness, unconfidence. This is fucking Ember. Or simply freezing up, right? Simply freezing up, overwhelmed, etc. Okay, so anything like that. So once we identify that point, that means we have a problem. So what is the first thing we can do to identify that problem? We're gonna open the replay, right? And that's a good thing. Do a lot of rewinding, and absorbing and understanding what the problem is, okay? And this could be a very small problem, right? So a lot of people struggle with a probe blocking their natural expansion, right? And they never systematize their response. They go, man, how the fuck do I deal with this? And my first question is always, oh, well, what are you doing to deal with it now? And it's always, oh, well, I don't know. Like, I try to pull a drone down and they build a thing. Like, okay, so what do you think should be their response? And people are like, what? Well, this is coaching. You're meant to tell me, Fig. And I'm like, no. StarCraft is a game that'll throw 50 million problems your way, right? I can't, there's no way for me to tell you how to solve every individual one. But what I can do, and what's going to be much more valuable, is me trying to help you systematize how you actually approach the problem yourself. So I say, okay, so like, let's look at it. What is the problem? It's like, well, the problem is a probe comes in and blocks it. Okay, cool. Okay, so you're going to hang out and try to kill that probe and then get rid of it. Okay, problem. By the time the probe gets weak enough that it has to run away or put a pylon down, you're at 500 minerals. We've already fucked up pretty bad, right? This is not a good plan. So I go, okay, well, we need to like bring a second drone down immediately and really get rid of it quickly. Or we need to go build a spawning pool straight away whilst killing it and then put the hatch down. Or we need to go build our third base. Like, we need to come up with a different plan. And then people are like, okay, cool. So, and then they write down, okay, I could do this, this, or this. And they're like, cool, we're done. I'm like, no. We need to choose one as well, right? So there's that confidence that I always obsessively talk about over and over and over again. I'm sure I've talked to you and you've heard me talking to other players about it. I'm like, no, you just confidently make a decision, right? Choose one. And that's got to be our set, because we've got to define it so that we can then get repetitions on that so we can start executing it better. So open the replay, absorb, understand what the problem is, and then formulate a response. So this could be anything. So this, like I said, it could be, there's a probe blocking hatch. It could be, I'm always low on gas at the 7-minute mark and I need about, and we can leave it as loose as that, or we can say, actually, specifically, I would like to have 250 more gas by this point so I can start both my upgrades or something like that, right? We want to really go deep on defining the problem and then formulating exactly what it is. So maybe you could throw a personal weak point or problem or something. For you, it's freezing up with lava spending in like the mid game and the late game especially, was it?
Yeah, mid game as well. Yeah.
Is it
Mid
worse
game
in
as
one matchup than another potentially, maybe?
It's worse, as I noticed, is when actually they delay the third, right?
Yep.
And there, I don't know what to do. Like, should I make drones? Should I make units? And then also, because there I usually forget to scout. I freeze completely, and the solution would be like, just scout and see how big the army they have, and then if the army is small, it means they are not efficient. So just make drones. Like, or if they're massing like a huge timing before the third, then just freak out and make units, right? You see my point? Like,
Yes.
it's a bit
Well,
Yeah.
those are all good points, but you are making a classic mistake where you're going a bit too fast through it. So, you know, as StarCraft players, we all have this tendency to go, oh, well, this, and then this, and then this. And the first thing I'm always going to tell you, and I'm going to try to repeat to you over and over again, is slow down. So what you just said to me was 3 separate problems, and you combined them as one in your head. And the moment you combine things as one problem, it becomes this big fucking Leviathan. It's a Kraken. It's impossible to tackle. You're like, there's shit here and here. There's tentacles everywhere. You know, it's like the Hydra. You chop off one head and 2 more pop up. So slow down and focus on one thing at a time. And rather than, you know, you can start with, okay, I don't spend my money in ZVT. But as soon as you delved into that, you actually popped out 3 individual problems there. One was you don't know how to react when your third is delayed. One is when something goes wrong with your build order, you forget to scout. And one is when you don't have scouting information, you've got no fucking idea what you're doing and you stop spending your money. All of these are individual problems. They're related and they flow into one another, but we want to solve one at a time. And that is so important. So I'm going to put quotation marks around that.
Has emerged.
I'm going to say Pomba, quotation mark. Okay, problem. That's 3 problems, not 1. Break it down, simplify it, okay? Prioritize and execute, simplify 1 problem at a time. Break it down and solve 1 at a time. And if you solve just 1, as you know, they're all related. The other ones will not pop up as much, so even if they're still problems and you still don't have a set play for them. So let's start first of all with third base is delayed. And I know this is purely theoretical at this point. Like we don't really have an exact replay in front of us where we're looking at it, but we're just playing it out in our head, which is, I think, more powerful most of the time. I think most people want to look at the game and they want to see it in front of them, but we're working on our visualizing, our ability to imagine and understand the game. And that's important because that if you can do that well enough, you can play back a game in your head or a key point in the game, and you can come up with an idea of how to solve that solution immediately off the top of your head without even loading the replay or while you're waiting for that rewind to get through the replay, okay?
Right. Also because I believe that in this kind of like, general problems, what my tendency is when I watch replays is like to make it too much specific. In the sense like, he didn't expand, right? He's going probably for a push and he had like, he had tanks and Taurus. And then I'm like, yeah, he had tanks or Taurus. I should have done this. No, the problem is that I was not scouting. You see my point? Like, it's sometimes it's easy to just focus on one replay.
Yep.
And forget the fundamental problem behind. Because then imagine, like I say, yeah, he had Taurus and tanks. I should have done other units. Then the next time, like, I play a matchup with ZVP and he's not expanding the third, like, I don't have like a general response to that, right? I just because the replay before I was thinking like, yeah, Taurus and tanks. You see my point, right?
Yeah. It's looking at what it's 2 things. It's looking at the end of the problem. So it's like the end result of a game, whereas the early problem is always much more impactful, right? Much more impactful, the start of the game. But it's also the fact that you're looking at the symptom rather than the system that's creating it, right? You're looking at you're kind of going, oh, there's tanks and Thors, and it's like, wait, there's, okay, we need to take a deep breath and systematically, okay, cool, what's my plan against tanks and Thors? And then once you break that down systematically, you can go, okay, cool, now was I actually in a decent enough position, early? Oh, I didn't even know it was tanks. Okay, so I didn't even know it was mech. I didn't know. Okay, so scouting, and then you can go, okay, let's like talk about what my scouting should always be in ZVT, standard scouting system. Okay, cool. Develop a system for that, right? We're not like, if I think maybe he's going tanks and Thors in a game, how will I scout that? Because it's like, wait. We need a system that usually scouts this, not let's like randomly do this scout that will scout this one thing specifically. Like, no, we want a system, okay? So
A new queen has
it's
emerged.
break it down one at a time, and often you'll find in those games, if you do that, and then you do that one, you've solved, okay, this is my plan against the composition, bam. Okay, deep breath. This is my plan for scouting to improve that, cool. This is the plan for future. And it's not always the right plan, or it could be a bit suboptimal. Doesn't matter. It's the process of actively problem solving that drastically speeds up your evolution as a StarCraft player. Even if you're solving problems a little suboptimally, the nature of you solving your own problems increases your learning speed drastically. In the long run, learning things on your own in StarCraft has to be a big part of it. And in any dense, complex strategy game, A lot of people want to go and ask other people for the answers. That's why all people that are bad at video games use walkthroughs, right? They want other people to tell them how to win, even if it's a really easy as fuck story-based RPG where they just need to look around the room for the key a little bit longer. It ruins your ability to problem solve. Now, don't get me wrong, you should learn from other people. You should learn from guides. You should draw inspiration from streamers and all sorts of other things. But that has to be blended with your own active problem solving, right? So we need to, as a player, systematize that and make sure that's automatic. So looking at your document, we talked about freezing up on lava.
That's exactly the reason.
Yep.
That's exactly the reason I'm not asking you to watch one specific replay. You see my point?
Exactly.
This is exactly why I wanted to have like more a theoretical chat, because I would like to learn, well, to get some inspiration from you about developing systems to improve in these aspects of the game. I don't know if you see my point.
I absolutely do. That's why I said I was so happy, man, because I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, sometimes I try to do a coaching session like this, and the student wants to keep bringing it back to a specific replay or individual tiny, minute problem and just kind of get the cheat sheet for how to deal with that. And, you know, when someone comes to me and is actually already pushing for that, like, I know we're going to get a lot out of this session. So this is awesome, man.
Yeah. Just can I add? I know we put a lot of stake on the plate now, but just to add another thing.
Yeah.
This is also interconnected to the fact that my mechanics needs improvement, right? Because I tell you like what I try to deal with one problem at a time, right? So we talked about fixing one problem at a time. So for the Arba lighting and the microcycle, what I tried to do in the past days is that just hop on a melee, like a normal custom games with an easy AI, very easy, just because I want to, like, you know, I'm trying to learn how to drone split in the beginning. So if I don't put an AI, basically you lose 2 seconds and, you know, you can't really do it. And so what I was doing is basically, I didn't care about the build order. So the goal was not to miss any inject while moving the army and not to get supply block. So what I would do is just produce zerglings, move them, and then tap on the archery once in a time, like tap the archery to spend the larva as soon as it pops before the inject cycle pops up, right? And then move again, and then double check with the camera location the level of the larva injects, right? To have an idea how long is a microcycle, which is 30 seconds. But of course we know it's 30 seconds, but the key is actually to have it in a muscle memory to go back every 30 seconds. You see my point?
Exactly.
You know. And so what I was doing is like, okay, move the zergling number 1, number 2, number 3. So learning how to move like 3 control groups, because this will help me when I want to backstab or scout or, you know, whatever. Click 4, which is my hatch, build a drone, and then check with the camera location. Okay, the inject is still maybe ballpark it 10 seconds. Okay, I can go back and move my army, right?
Yeah.
Move, or a move, and then go back, inject, overload, zerglings, and then go back and move my army. You see my point? That was a bit the training I'm trying to do for the microcycle.
Yeah. I think that's perfect. I think little exercises like that can give you very good benefits. It's really nice. Like, you don't want to obsess over this and do hundreds and hundreds of games, but doing a little bit of that is great. It's like the just basic passing a ball in football practice that you do every single time you're there. It's always good to do 5 minutes of this every day or something like that.
Exactly. I do one every day, something like that. You know, like
awesome.
15 minutes until I max out, you know. And then I opt out of the game and then continue with other stuff, right? And so by doing this, what I realized, sorry if I keep going, but
no, this is good. This is really good. This gives me a lot of insight into how you're learning. So
what I realized by doing this is that if I do this, my brain is only focused entirely on that. So my mechanics allow me to do only that. Basically what this means is that if I now start to build stuff following the build order, or a-moving or creep spreading, I'm already like sleeping on the macrocycle and producing larvae, right?
Yeah.
So I lack the multitasking to say I focus on my build on the macro or I do other stuff, right? And this could be one of the reasons, aside from being like unsecure what to do against a specific matchup, could be a reason in which when I do like creep spread or when I move the army, I neglect the macrocycle.
Our
Yes.
base is under attack.
I don't know if you see what I mean, because
Yeah.
you know, like when you ask, yeah, my macro is bad, and people tell you, yeah, macro better, yeah, but it's too easy to say macro better. You need to understand what is causing you not to macro perfectly.
Our
Yeah,
forces are
it's
under attack.
drastically different when someone's comfortable doing
We
a
have
set of
met the
actions,
enemy
right?
in
So
combat.
practicing the
Narrow
mechanics, and
cluster 20.
you'll have the same experience when you start memorizing set plays and these little reactions a little bit more, where you find you don't even have to look at what you're doing. This is the way I describe it, where it's like it's the same thing when you have a really well organized macro cycle, where like at least half of your attention during that macro cycle can kind of be looking at your minimap. Like you can be glancing at your minimap through the whole macro cycle and almost planning the next step. Because you've already decided I'm building just drones right now, right? It's like inject, 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 build some overlords, build drones. There's no problem solving, and you're clicking hotkeys on your keyboard that don't move.
Met the enemy
You're
in
just
combat.
boxing queens at your hatcheries, or whichever method you're using. Yeah, you're using the camera hotkey method. So you're just boxing. You don't even need to look at your screen to box those queens and inject in the center of your screen because your camera hotkeys
Right,
are centered.
right.
So you're actually planning ahead because you've got this little set play of this is how I spend my money, right? And it gets to this point, you're like, oh shit, like this is practice now. And it's the same with any mechanics, like you were talking about putting down your buildings, building your drones, rallying them. Once you've got that down, where you've focused just on that enough and you've practiced it so goddamned well, it becomes automatic, and you're barely focusing on it. You're barely even looking at it anymore. So this is so fantastic because it just allows it to happen, and suddenly it's like, cool, I'm doing that. I know what I got to do. Let's think about the next step. Let's think about reorganizing my mental checklist, right? Let's think about, you know, and we start
Exactly,
planning
exactly.
1 step ahead, then 2 steps, then 3 steps ahead. And yeah, we suddenly become more in control as a StarCraft player. So
Yeah, I know it's very theoretical, but it's something that I wanted to discuss with you because I think like that if I want to do the next step, I need to be aware of these things. You know, it's not necessary anymore. If you hop into Diamond, it's not necessary anymore to say like, you know, practice injecting. You need to practice in a way that you know, you need to reach a level where you can do other stuff while you're macroing. And this is very important because I notice if I start doing some, you know, only setting up, for example, setting up like a concave and waiting for the engagement, already my macro is slipping,
yeah,
right? This is not good anymore if you're in Diamond. It works in Platinum, you know, if you just focus on macro and then do a big engagement. But in Diamond, you know, Diamond players are already like, some of them are already veteran player already. You see my point? I'm
Yeah.
relatively fresh still, but
Every 300 MMR is like an entirely new world of StarCraft. Is the way I like to think of it. Like every 300 MMR, it's not that much when you think about how big the ladder is, but you know, it's another world of player. It really is. I guess if you really want to say another world, you could say it's 500 MMR. Even then, there are so many levels where it's a whole new world. So you can do that focused mechanical practice in terms of like if your macro slips in an engagement. Just remember, like I'm a player who's probably one of the worst at keeping up macro when a game gets busy with tactics and stuff. I spend a lot of time thinking about how what my opponent's goal is, how I can counter that goal. I think a lot about tactics and how I can ambush, backstab, surprise them, how I can get drops in, etc. Right? I spend a lot of time on that, and you see me floating a lot more money than other high-level players. But the thing is, I will spend that money and keep my rhythm around that, right? Those moments of, oh, you're floating 3,000 minerals, bam, it'll get spent, right? Bam, the injects get queued up. So just remember to have a flexible scale. If you're like, my money's building up a little bit and my injects are 10 seconds late. Well, you were setting up a flank on his army. That's not a problem. That is not a problem. For your mechanical level, that is not, okay? What is a problem, though? It's if you're like, I got a macro while I'm setting up this flank. You go and inject 2 hatcheries and build 6 zerglings. And, like, you're not building overlords. You're not spending all of your lava. And then you go back to your army. It's if your macro cycle breaks down and stops being systematic while you're doing that, right? So it is fine for your macro cycle to have bigger breaks, bigger pauses. You've got higher priorities on your mental checklist. You are focusing on your army, right? So just make sure you don't fall into that trap, because I coach so many players like, I'm not spending my money properly. Look, I got 1,000 minerals. I'm like, it's the mid game. It doesn't fucking matter. There are a lot more important things for you to focus on. As long as you get on top of that, that spending once the fights are done. As long as when the game calms down, you take a deep breath and can bounce back into the macro rhythm. And that's usually the more common problem, is players, once the other stuff happens, they're like, I got to spend the money. And everything's just like chaos. It's like, inject this hatch. Start an upgrade. Inject another hatch. Start an upgrade. Ooh, I'm supply blocked. And it's like, no. What is that anchoring thing? Whenever we come back from a fight, what is the set play? You can even write that out as a problem, right? So I want you to take a look at the document, and I really want us to go through these problems theoretically, even without necessarily having a replay in front of us, okay? So we'll even write that one down as one. Not spending money once the fighting starts, spending money whilst flanking and setting up engages, okay? So you see where it says third base is delayed. Or third is base delayed. There we go. So that is the problem, right? So what's the reaction list? So start filling out the dot points of exactly what you think you should do. This is Zerg versus Terran. So ZV
or Protoss, I mean, I had both, so.
Well, we can start with ZVT.
Yeah.
Then we can. So start filling that out in the document, writing down what you think you should do there. So this is, very important to kind of, especially with these small little disruptions in the early game. The number of Zergs who need to do the exercise we're doing right here for Reaper harass, which happens every game in TVZ, and people have never systematized they're like, okay, the Reaper's making me micro. They're like, I'm going to hit a 36 supply block and not spend my lava, because I'm too busy staring at my links. And I'm like, well, wait, what? This happens every game. How have we not taken the time to systematize this? I take it for granted. I'm like, hey, we're making a mistake. Come up with a set play for that mistake, right? So, all right, so ZVT, third base is delayed. We make a round of units. So you said units. Can we specify what units those are as well? Is that drones or zerglings?
Sorry. Let's say zerglings.
Do you want to make a round of zerglings? What's that for?
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. That's a good question. I would say make a round of drones. Then scout for tech and army, right?
Why? Why are we scouting for tech and army?
So if it's delaying the third, if its build is efficient, it makes sense if he's preparing for a timing. Right?
Or he could just be doing a normal macro build. So if you think about it, you might have noticed that there are more players who block your third, who go for an attack. They're trying to throw you off. For sure. Maybe that's a higher percentage.
Of my opponent. The third of my opponent. I meant.
Oh, you're blocking the opponent's third base.
No, not blocking. Like, I see that he didn't put down a third. He's not.
Oh! I'm talking about someone blocking your third hatch going down. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So, cool. What are you? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. That makes. Okay. So you're saying if they're on two base, so you're trying to come up with a plan for how to stay safe against a player who hasn't shown a third yet. So. Well, okay. Okay, no army. Okay, so this is a very complicated list, which is not bad. But first of all, I want to start with, so what's our basic ZVT scouting look like? So what does your scouting in ZVT look like? With this top list, you see this dot point list? Like, when do you normally scout to find this out? Like, what is your early scouting?
Okay, so first Overlord, I rally to the natural to see if the natural goes down. Then I rally to the right away to the ramp and then back to the pillar.
Okay.
So sometimes the ramp allows me to see like
A new queen.
if I have a reactor on the barrack or not.
So on most maps, I mean, we can actually look in game right now. This is a different map, but on most maps, the pillar is over here, far away from the production, which means if you put the overlord on the pillar, you actually can't scout the production with it later. So do you have an overlord sacrifice built into your build, or do you just not bother?
Yes, I have another one usually.
So your second overlord comes across the map and sacrifices normally?
Yes.
Okay. And when does that go in normally?
Good question. I would say ideally I would have it before 4 minutes, right?
So we'll just say 4 minutes is about the time it sacrifices. In this replay, it was about 4 minutes it went in. So, cool.
Okay.
All right. So after that, so is there any other way that you kind of look for a sign of, oh, no third CC? Is there any follow-up scouting, or is it just kind of like, is there a moment in the game where you go, oh shit, there's no third down yet? Is it just like, I feel like normally there should be a third?
Usually I send spotters, link spotters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then usually I ballpark it around 5 minutes. If they don't expand on 5 minutes, then I kind of like start to wonder what's going on.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's a system, right? That's a nice little scouting system. So
I don't know if it's good enough, but yeah.
The thing is, often that command center builds on the high ground, right? Now, usually it will build in the natural wall for most players. So just poking a link up the ramp will see it. Now, I don't know what the meta's like at your level, your server. Maybe a lot of people build that in their main base, and since you have no way of scouting that, unless you want to go for a second overlord sacrifice, like you might see it with the first overlord, but if they build it just after that dies, like you have no way of scouting it, right? So for me, I scout the natural wall, or I see it there with the overlord or the zergling, and I go, cool, you got a CC, or hey, you don't have a CC. What the fuck's going on, buddy? I think you're doing a 2-base build, right? Thing is, 5 minutes is too early, because if they build that on the high, like the third base is never down by 5 minutes. Like it's never on location. It can be finished building by 5 minutes. Yeah. Usually about 5:30. Definitely it'll be started by 5 minutes most of the time. But if you're not able to scout that main, there's no way for you to know, right?
Yeah.
So just going through that, it is something you might need to develop that system a little bit more. It should be building by 5 minutes. So we'll say OV plus Lings can see if it's building in natural. And I can add a sub point, check, replays.
Our drones are under attack.
If many Terrans build it in main, you won't know until later.
Yes.
So anyway, let's go down to your reaction again. So you said, okay, the third's delayed. I should make a round of drones. I should scout for the tech and army and basically try to get more information about what's going on. If they don't have a lot of army, I will go back on droning. And I will see a scary army. I will build units. Okay, cool. So I think this is a classic example of an overcomplicated reaction where it's good that you did this. This is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. This is the right sort of response where you've written out a systematic response. But I get to give my, more experience and just say, oh, wait, this is a bit too complicated. Let's simplify it just a little bit here, okay? So let's go to this replay because I'd like us to look in-game and to give us a little bit of, hey, okay, this game might not be the most standard. You lost a lot of drones to some harassment and stuff, but let's take a look.
Yeah, that's actually a big problem I have with Hellion. I can't micro the Hellion when they're diving. Like against them, I don't know. It's always barbecue.
That's all right. We'll focus on that as well in a sec. So that'll be another good one. Let's add. Can you write that down below all these bold dot points? Add another one, where it says, just down there somewhere. Yeah, defending the barbecue should be good. So I just so we can deal with that later. Yeah, down there. Awesome. Consider a tech switch. Okay, so basically instead of all of this. Pig's reaction, just to give you an idea of how we would rather have simpler reactions wherever possible. So, because this is a scouting reaction. Okay, so this is one which is much harder. So, because this is a reaction to imperfect information, it's something we want to be more generalized. So if this was a problem where he's blocking your third base with an engineering bay, right? Or an SCV and a Reaper, that's something we can come up with a much more exact response. We can be much more exact.
Expand somewhere else, if you ask me. But
yeah, and expand somewhere else. But because that's already delayed, you'd need to remember to build an Overlord earlier than normal, start a third Queen earlier than normal, spend your lava, build drones.
Spend the money, or
Yeah, basically, and the thing is, a lot of people fuck that up, right? But you can anything like that, any other situation, you can be more exact. But whenever you're responding to this imperfect, he doesn't have a third. I don't know. It's something where generally what you want to say to yourself is, okay, well, what are the 2 base attacks that I'm scared of, right? So off the top of your head, any ideas? If they're not going a third CC, is it a big marine tank push that gets you? Is it big scary Hellbat pushes where they've delayed their third CC? Like, what off the top of your head is the thing that you're actually worried about off 2 base?
usually, either it's a big marine tank push or a Hellbat. Yeah.
Okay, so
because usually, because Hellbat usually take me unprepared most of the time, because you need to scout the armory, right? And it's very hard for me to scout the armory, before. So I need to have a system where you can deal with this.
Yeah.
And I try to have many queens, enough queens to deal with this, and zerglings when they're spread out. The thing is, when they are in still aliens, I can't micro it because they come and dive, and my queens are just trying to block with my queens and my zerglings, and it's a mess.
All right, this is great. I'm really keen to go look at that in a second. We've got a replay in front of us, which is fantastic. It'll allow us to go deep on it.
And if it's a marine tank push, sometimes I'm unprepared because I don't have the Bane Nest yet.
Yeah.
Right. And if I'm doing the rule of 1 gas, my Bane Nest drops after 3 bases saturation.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I got unprepared because if they push with marine and tanks, and I'm just engaging with zergles and queen, dude, I'm done.
Okay. So stare at the document, not the replay right now. These are all amazing pieces of information, but we need to systematize this response. Pay attention to what I'm saying and what I'm writing here, and think about this as a system, not just the information I'm giving you, but the system, okay?
Yeah.
So you're talking about, okay, if their third's delayed, what do I do? I'm backtracking and I'm taking it back. I'm like, wait. First of all, what are the main things we're worried about if that third is delayed? Let's be very specific. Hellbat push is big. Okay. And you've kind of said, okay, we don't have Bane Nest on time. Not ready, can't hold, basically is the big problem. Okay, so let's be very specific now. What timer are those pushes hitting us? And I'm going to imagine you don't know, right?
No, I'm sorry. I know when the 211 hits, I know where the Hellions, when they hit, depending how many they are, right?
So if it's a Hellbat push, ignoring Hellion run-bys, we're talking about a Hellbat push, spitball. Take a guess. Anytime you're forced out there, you have no idea, but you're forced to... It's kind of like when you bet on a sports match and suddenly you've got more on the line. Forces you to remember and to get more involved.
I'd say 5:30.
Okay, so we're going to guess 5:30. Yeah. 5:30. And you know what? I think that's probably pretty correct a lot of the time. About 5:30. Pig's note. Pig's note. Could be 4:30 technically, but that's exceptionally rare. And especially it depends when you're playing, who you're playing, right? As well.
Yeah.
No one's doing the fastest gas first. Hellbat.
Usually at this time they don't come alone. Most of the time it's like Banshee and BC together, right? So you need to spread the queens in a way that you can save your or BC, right? Banshee or BC, and then you need to find a way to actually, protect your third, and at the same time zone out the BC or zone out the Banshees from your main. Right, so that's a huge problem for me, because my micro in that situation, I panic, I don't know what to and then I end up wasting my queens.
So one of the best things we could have is if we had replays saved of all of these little situations for our next session, right? Because I know you won't have them all saved and labeled right now, but it's
Yeah.
BC,
Next
Hellbat,
session, yeah.
and you can even have you can have already done a lot of the work, right? Simply by recording this, because you should have already said, that got me. Save the replay at 6 minute, 8 Hellbat, 1 BC timing. Bam, that's saved. And then you can pour over that replay and try to figure out, okay, what exactly should I do with my queens? If I did, okay, I should do this. This is how I can improve my queen micro. This is what I should do here. Maybe I should move a spore crawler over. I got to bring my queens that are injecting queens over. Okay, cool. What do I do with my zerglings? They're useless running into 8 hellbats. Do we counterattack? Do we run in to cut off reinforcements? Okay. And at the end of all that, do we need a Baneley nest? Do we need a roach horn? But it's so important to go through and have the replay saved and know the game timer and that sort of stuff. Okay.
All right.
And the
Then
reason
I will prepare for the next session.
exactly. So part of this is that's a Hellbat timing, and that is exceptionally different to a 2-base Marine tank push, which is going to hit quite a bit later, right? So Hellbats. So what if it is 2-base Marine tank? I mean, I would say it's probably going to be like 7:30 at the earliest that they're hitting you. So that's a very different situation, right? So these are two very different things that we're scouting for, or that we want to try to identify, and they're different things we need kind of certain responses for. So I would actually say just having enough lings and queens, even without Bane Nest, is totally fine. But that being said, Bane Nest should be finished by 7:30, right? 7:30 is not that fast. Now, maybe we're losing 20 drones in the lead up to that, so everything's mega delayed, or whatever the case may be. But the important thing is once we've written down the game timer of when that hits and that sort of stuff, we can also start to define it. So, okay, a 2-base push could come. So the first thing you want to identify is...
In a perfect world, right? At 7:30, if I follow the rule of 1 gas, and if they go for a 1-1-1, right? They come with aliens, they're us. In a perfect world, I would have queen. I don't lose so many drones, and by 7:30, I should be already like dropping my dropped my gases and my Bane nest, and I should be going for layer already, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the case, because if you have 8 aliens barbecuing like you're completely your third, well then you know.
But one problem at a time, right? We've got to make sure. It's so easy for us to say, okay, the problem is this, but I can't because of this other problem. Okay, so let's straighten up, think about things very clearly and cleanly for a second. Let's imagine we have perfect information. Let's imagine we also had a clean opening. Now, I'm not saying you're going to have a pro gamer benchmark. Right. You're not going to have 70 drones at 5 minutes 45, with double upgrades started. It's not going to happen. That's fine. But let's imagine I didn't lose 35 drones in a shitload of mining time, okay? Let's just imagine some middle ground. It's a standard situation. All right. So your opponent's hitting you off 2 bases. They're hitting you about 7:30. So what have we defined here? Let's start writing out the rules. And I'm going to write this up the top. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Problem. That's not 3 problems. Break it down and solve them at a time. So what is the system? Number 1, define the problem. So what are some things for defining the problem? Game timer it hits, specific units that hit, and as well as tactical details. Oh, well, the Liberator hits the main, the Hellions hit the third, right? Could be something like that, okay? So define the problem. Define how to scout it. Focus on how your standard scouting can identify this. Look for the smallest possible changes to that scouting system. So that's the most important thing. Don't be like, I gotta fucking send 3 speed overlords in or I won't know it's BCs. Instead go, let's look at how we can identify that it's BCs without that. Or can we simply defend it with a standard without scouting it, which is often the case. So if we go, how do I scout this? Fuck, I can't. Fuck. And I'm like, calm down. You don't need to scout it always. That's the whole point of having a solid build order, is it kind of defends a lot of stuff, right? So define the problem, exact game timer in it, specific units in it, tactical details. Okay, so now let's look at our response. So obviously, maybe a problem might not always be your opponent attacking you. A problem might not be the game timer of when your opponent's hitting you, but it could be 6 minutes in the game, just as I'm getting to 3 base saturation, I'm always gas starved and can't start my upgrades, right? It's the important thing is to add the details, right? A lot of the time it's responding to something our opponent does, which is why I'm writing it out in this format, but you can adapt this to just macro problems that are systematic as well. Any systemic problem
of course,
got to be addressed.
Mineral field has
So
been
in terms of response, there are a few things. Exact ideal situation to have a safe lead. So this is very specific to defending a push. So it's basically, if we want to break that down, how many workers and bases do I want versus them? So what's a good example of that? They're doing a 2-base push with Marine Tank. What's the maximum workers they can be taking advantage of efficiently on 2 bases?
I would say 22, 44 plus another.
Our forces
10.
are under attack.
Not really another 10. Because past 20 on minerals is pretty bad. So maximum another 8. So at most, what's 44 plus 8? That's 52. Let's say 45 to 50. Because realistically, anything over 40, like they could do a 2-base all-in off like 39 SCVs. You know, they don't have to take the 4th gas. So you can split the difference there and say, like 40, 42, 40, 44. Let's just say 45, right? And you
right,
can,
you're right. Yes, of course, because otherwise they don't mine efficiently. Yeah, sure.
yeah, and if they're all-inning you, it's pretty rare for them to overmake SCVs, right? If they're macroing up, sure, they'll go 60 SCVs before their 3rd lands, no worries. But if they're doing
Right.
so you want to let's just assume the minimum, the 22 for each base, 16 on minerals, 6 on gas. Assume that amount.
44.
And that's just a nice set number. So let's say they go 44. Off the top of your head, they're going 44 SCVs, Marines, tanks, medevacs. It's a reasonably high tier army. They're getting a +1 attack upgrade.
Our forces are under attack.
Off the top of your head, what do you think is a good drone count to have a safe lead, but to still have swapped into unit production early enough to be very safe?
I would say 1 mineral line more, 16 more.
Okay, so you're thinking how many workers is that in
Same
total?
gases and 60.
So you're thinking 60 drones and 4 gases, was it?
Yeah, something.
4 gases. So basically it's
New queen has
full saturation, no gases on the 3rd. So in a lot of scenarios, that's kind of greedy, but because you are playing a very low-tech build, I think that's totally fine in this scenario. So let me talk about how that could be problematic. So if you are someone who is rushing hydras and mutas or something, you're like doing a 2-base tech to really fast mutas, then into Lingbane, and you're playing against the 2-base Marine Tank push, and you try to go a full mineral line ahead of him on workers, you're going to get your shit pushed in. Like, you're going to get smashed in the face. But that's because your economy is actually lower than your opponent's, or at best even, right? However, with your build order, you're always ahead in economy, right? But you're behind in tech. You're behind in upgrades a lot of the time as well, right? So you can afford to push that mineral advantage a bit more because you are further behind in tech. So you're saying full saturation, no gases on the 3rd, 60 drones. And this is something anytime you're dealing with any push, and this is something that has been lost in the art of StarCraft for many, many players on the ladder. And it's, how do I deal with this push? And even the GM players who ask me this, they don't tell me how many workers they think. And I'm like, what are you doing? Well, how many workers have you been defending with? They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, dude, you're in GM. How are you not thinking about your worker count as a Zerg player? Zerg is all about where you stop workers and start pumping army. So to hold a push, that's 90%. Everyone wants to know tactically, how do I engage the Immortals and Sentries? What units do I build to counter the Colossus? And I'm like, it still doesn't matter nearly as much as you stopping drones at the right point. If they're on 44 workers, we want to know the exact worker count for our strategy, okay? So
Absolutely.
if they're doing
I
it,
completely see your point, yeah.
awesome. So this is something you want as a habit. Anytime anything hits you, you're like, oh shit, this is a big 2-base push. Even if it's like, you know how Protoss sometimes don't take the gas on their 3rd and they go charge an Immortal Archon. Big push, +1. And you want to make sure you go, okay, how many drones do I go against this? You know, you want to define that to make sure you understand your reaction. And that gives you so much confidence once you start doing that, because that is like the epitome of most set responses to styles in StarCraft. If I'm confused about what someone's doing, I just keep building units. I had a game against a Protoss player who like took the latest third of all time. He kept going with an immortal push, couldn't push in, and would pull back, and just kept building immortals and immortals and sentries and sentries and immortals and sentries, and got up to like +2 upgrades. And I just had to stay this like certain window of drones ahead of them all game, barely adding a few more drones every minute or so, and just keeping up my army, because I knew if at any point I was like, well, he hasn't attacked, I'm gonna build 25 drones. The push would just kill me. Like, I knew that I needed to maintain just the right balance. And I wish I had that replay saved, because it's the perfect example of kind of like that balancing act that you have to do as a player. So full saturation, what you said was perfect. So why was that perfect? I'm gonna add a little bit of commentary down here on your reaction.
I would say because it's mineral focused, my response, right? Because
Exactly.
I need queens, zerglings, and banes. So
You could even do it off just 3 gases, right? Potentially.
yeah, potentially yes. Yeah.
But
potentially, yeah.
alternate scenario where you're going, 2 base muta, you might need to actually stay on the exact same worker count as Terran. Now that's counterintuitive, right? To what most Zergs think. But isn't Zerg meant to have more workers? Not when you're teching up super hard and fast and paying economy for it, right? Slowing down your economy for it. So in that scenario, players often say, players worry that if they're putting themselves behind in economy, they're fucked if the Terran just expands. Okay, that's the kind of things people say. They're like, but if I'm on 45, he's on 45 workers, he's got more income with mules, and then if he doesn't overcommit, like I'm just screwed. And I'm like, no, you're still a Zerg player, but it's okay because you can drone that 3rd base instantly once you're safe. You can drone very fast and take a 4th and a 5th kind of thing, right? You will also have mutas for harassing. You've got speed banes, and you can cover the map in creep. So there's these other advantages you get if you play in that like real controlling tech and stuff. Okay, I'm not ahead in economy, but guess what? If they don't push, I get to cover the map in creep. I get to harass them, and then I can go really hard into drones a bit later. And even though it's not the direct path to the economy, it still works. So same thing, if you're ever caught in a very tech-oriented situation or you're behind in a game, you might need to do that. But for your build, 60 drones, it's like, oh, just don't take the gases on the 3rd. Oh, he's doing a 2-base push? Well, we don't need a Hydrogen and an infestation pit, right? These are not important at all. So if you're playing against a Terran player and you're like, normally I go Hydra for... Do you go Hydra Bane or Mutiling Bane against Terran?
Hydra Bane.
You go Hydra Bane? So obviously you don't want Hydras. You might not even start your 2/2 upgrades, right? Because they're not going to be done in time. So these are some things. So let's add some stuff. So I'm going to move that alternate scenario down. So what are some other details to your reaction there? Skip Hydras. No OV speed. Not many overseers or anything like that, right? Basically, we're just cutting any excess shit. What else did I say there? Like no skip 2/2. Skip 2/2. They won't be ready in time. The game's going to be decided from that fight. If the game drags on, you crush the push, then you can start 2/2. Then you can drone up the gases on the 3rd and then go for the Hydrogen, right? Once you get more of an advantage. Yeah, you can go for all that.
Because if you crush the push, then you can safely drone back again.
Yeah, you can push that lead even further. So it's really nice to define these little details, right? So you start to like really iron out exactly what's going on. And these are rather complicated responses, right? So we're out of time. Okay, Hellions. Let's finish up on Hellions. I think systematically though, before we talk about Hellions, any questions on this system of kind of approaching the problem? I'm obviously talking about a lot of different details, but is it kind of clear?
I love it. I love the system. Just one more,
Yep.
30 seconds. Like I will have a little bit of time in the next weeks because I'm home. Can you like advise me like a scheme of training that I can use for mechanics and mental checklist and all these things?
I think I think what you're doing is really good. Just doing the little bit of mechanical practice each day, like even just 10 minutes is enough. That's fine in the empty custom game or the easy AI. I think what I want to, I think, yeah, practicing builds is good. But I think more importantly is like just addressing those problems and defining these little moments within the game. So, you know, something as small as a Liberator sieging in your main, I want you to go, did I respond well to this? No. Slow down and write down the exact response to it. So, let's do that right now, real quickly. So, down the bottom, Liberator sieges, no queen at base.
This we did already.
We already talked about that. Okay.
Yeah.
So, off the top of your head, right here, what should your response have been as soon as you saw this lib sieged up in the middle line?
Remove drones. Put a spore outside the liberation zone. Queue up the queen to attack. Put spores in the other bases. And then queue the other queens, intercept the liberator, and go back. Put back drones on.
That was I very clearly remember this. I forgot that was you. I went over went over that little piece with. Awesome. Big problem as well. Why was there no queen in the main? Ooh. We pulled it to the front. Now you can do that if the other queen's already started building. But we clearly pulled that queen away when the other queen was not even there, which gives you a massive window where even if you move the spore and run the drones, the Liberator can reposition and it can drain a ridiculous amount of your APM. So that's just a rule, right? You should never pull the queen from your main unless you've got another queen in production. I often will leave the queen there all game these days just because everyone's going Liberator at the moment, where I'm like, no, I only pull that queen when the other queen pops out. I always need to have one queen ready or that Liberator drives me crazy.
Right. Yeah. But I usually do the same. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, basically just every little problem, do that for, and visualize those stages, okay? I think that will make your mechanics get better as well. It's if you know exactly what you're supposed to do in the moment, you will start doing it faster with time. But it's we need to get rid of the mental delay. That is the biggest thing with any mechanics. You can get very high level without being particularly fast as long as you're organized enough. So that's the important thing. And we'll still have, I think, 2 more coaching sessions after this, you said, right?
Yeah. We can talk about this, yeah.
Well, let's very quickly with the Hellions. I'm just going to give you the cheat sheet for it. Your Overlord positioning is okay, but not perfect. So this Overlord up here, if you see where I'm signaling, is in a little bit of...
Let me put on everyone's camera first. Yeah.
This Overlord's it should be down to the left, because it's not actually watching the middle path. It's in a bit of a weird position. And this other Overlord here should be a bit further over to the left, in case the aliens come from that angle. So those Overlords could be better positioned. Right? Very important to have those there. Other than that, you said, okay, Hellions keep running around, running circles around
I saw them already. Like, the problem is that I didn't see them, you know? Like, I saw them. It's just, okay, the queen, arriving queen, what I do?
Yeah, so, well, if we look at this game, you've got 2,000 minerals already, only 41 drones, and only 6 queens. So this game, he hasn't even done the damage yet. He's done no damage to you. Oh, he did kill 6 workers with a little mini run-in, but that's not really... that's all the Liberator. That just happened. This money was banking up before that moment. So that's just a macro error in that regard. And how many Lings do you think we need at this point? When they can have 8 Hellions, or in this case, it's even 9 Hellions on the map, but he's got 7 of them up here, so could have 8. I think he's lost 1 already. How many Lings do you think you need at this point of the game? And do you have a set moment where you build up to that Ling count after your initial ones?
So eventually, so at 4 minutes, I know that they could possibly come with 4 aliens, and there I usually build 12 larvae of Lings. Maybe
so you go up to 24 Zerglings.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's overly safe, but I'm okay with it for now. I would say you don't need that many usually. But it's not the end of the world. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So if you do that, that's overly safe. Over time, we'll scale that back a little bit. But for now, we should have done that. You didn't do it this game. Or if you did, you lost a bunch of you did lose a lot more Zerglings than you needed to in this early game, which shows that wait a second, why do we only have 9 Zerglings right now? If we've got 20 Zerglings, easiest A move of our life. Technically, we'd want to spread the Zerglings as well, but even if we just A moved at these Hellions, you know, that they would have surrounded them and killed them. Yeah. So if you just have those Lings on time and you have your Queens in position each rotation of those Hellions, which you were doing an okay job of, but yeah, you just didn't have the Ling count, and you want to have the Lings pre-spread. So if the Hellions come in from that third base, you want to click some of your Lings up behind the mineral line and some below the hatch, so they're naturally spread when you A move them. You don't want them running in a bit ball.
So
if they're running, if they're running,
flank the aliens.
yeah, if they're running from here towards the natural, we want some at the natural, some at the third. Basically, you just always want them spread out in a line, a horizontal battle line, preferably, or an arc facing the Hellions. Whereas if they're in a column, they're lining up for the Hellion shot and they get roasted. That's all. So there's just a little bit of repositioning the angle they are compared to the orientation the Hellions are diving.
Right. And so you want to cover the base where they are mostly gonna dive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So a simple way of doing it is just leaving like half the Lings in front of the natural and half the Lings like behind the third mineral line or something like that. But you can reposition them as needed depending on how they dive around and where they move around. And if you just left them in a big clump in between the natural and third, that's okay. And then when you see them actually trying to go past the Queens, that's when you move your control group over, and then you try to box half of them and split them to the side so that they create a bit of a flank or a spread.
Right.
Yeah.
So and you were mentioning you need this net of Lings in case they go past the Queens, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
In one of your other coaching sessions.
Yes. Yep. The Queens of the Trident. It's the classic gladiator with the net and the trident. You know. Right. Awesome, man. So yeah, that's the main one there. In terms of the big Hellbat timing with like BC and stuff, benchmark when it hits, and perhaps you can add like a 4-minute 45 Bane Nest for more safety to your build. But generally also like super define, getting your Queens down, having, 8 Queens on time, moving Spore over between natural and third, etc. Natural and third, running drones is also a big one. Running drones away. It's hard for them to kill the third base, but it's very easy for them to kill all the drones if they're exposed.
Yeah.
So
how many Queens?
Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to ask you as a benchmark: how many Queens you should have when you go for a rule of one gas? When
8 or 9. 7 is the
9.
bare minimum, but because we've got BCs nowadays, I would say 8 is usually the good kind of sweet spot. 8 or 9.
So you would have like 3 injecting and 6 on your creep defensive.
Yep. Yeah, often when that sort of attack hits, you might only have 6 or 7, depending on, if it's a fast Hellbat timing. So you do need to bring your injecting Queens to defend. If it's a big anytime it's like a Hellbat attack, anything that's really committed like that, you want to pull all the Queens to the front.
You pull them and instantly make. So you first inject, and then you pull them, and then you make new ones, right? That would be the response.
Yeah, if you've got time, if your Overlord spotted the morph early enough, if they're already on top of your Queens or getting close to that base, you might just quickly grab them. Because if you don't inject, it also means they're closer to transfuse energy, remember. Normally, if you're pulling Queens to the front, you've got all the time in the world. If there's Hellbats and BCs and shit, like if there's a crazy push like that, same thing if there's a Marauder, where they drop concussive Marauders out of a medevac by surprise and they have Hellbats? That's a really scary attack that's like very popular. That's one of the most powerful. I hate TY. I hate him. He always reminds people that's a build and he uses it every best of 5 and almost always wins a game. I remember he did it for Serral. He barely lost. Versus Serral with that. And I was like, dude, I thought that was going to work. Was Serral dark, maybe? It was a really good Zerg.
He's cool. Pig seems like a good guy. Pig bacon
so
beef.
yeah, awesome, man. I got to run, but that should be amazing. Every time you feel unconfident, that's a problem. Write the problem down, define it a little bit more, come up with a response. Simply going through this process is so powerful. And remember, if you do it wrong, it doesn't matter. It's more about choosing and making a decision. You do that, you're on the right track, man.
I think this system is amazing. Yeah, thank you very much.
No worries, man. It'll take a while. It'll be very slow at first, but you'll build the habits. All right, man. I'll let you get in some more practice games, hopefully.
Yeah.
And look forward to talking to you soon, mate.
Thank you very much, Jared. Have a
Good
nice
night,
day.
man.
Ciao.
You too. What a legend. Dude, I am so happy when a student comes to me that mentally prepared with a whole bunch of stuff saying, I have systemic problems that I do not understand how to solve. I don't have the mental checklist really going at all the way Day 9 talks about, and I need to get it. That's awesome.